I had this one guy that once told me, he's like, Andrew, there's no difference between running one and multiple. And I just started laughing at him because I'm like, no, there is a difference. Most people don't think there's much of a difference until they do it. And then they go, holy shit, this is different. There's more problems that are coming at me. And you basically need to change how you manage. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator. I am your host, Andrew Scott, and today we're talking all about multiple units, going from 2 units to 5 units and what you need to do everywhere in between. Now, if you don't know who I am, I have been a restaurant owner for almost 20 years now, multiple locations, as many as 4. We've also got Nathan on the show today. He has been a regional manager for, I believe, 7 concepts, up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 plus million annually, 700 employees. I may have those stats mostly correct, but basically we work together in the capacity at ownership, where we help restaurant owners increase their freedom with their time, make more profit on the bottom line, and also help them grow their sales. So that's what we do. But today, let's dive in. So Nathan, multiple units. We talked in one of our last episodes about, going from 1 to 2, because that's like the biggest jump in difference, right? So you're getting used to, being a multi-unit owner versus a single owner. Most people don't think there's much of a difference until they do it. And then they go, holy shit, this is different. There's more problems that are coming at me. And you basically need to change how you manage. It's funny because I had this one guy that once told me, he's like, Andrew, there's no difference between running one and multiple. And I just started laughing at him because I'm like, no, there is a difference. Now, there might not be a difference in how the product comes out of the kitchen. There might not be a difference in how, you turn the open sign on in the morning. But the difference is how you, as an owner, have to change in your business. And really, that's what the biggest shift is, because you're taking what you used to do and then you're piecing that out to different positions to make sure it all gets done. And then you, as an owner, have to take on a different skill set of an executive, which is where you're managing managers. And that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, right? So today we're going to dive into a few things, to go to that 2 to 5 level, because we view 2 to 5 being very similar. Like the structures are pretty similar. Like going from 1 to 2 is totally different. Going from 2 to 3, that's another big evolution, but there's not a ton of differences between, 3 to 5, for example. So that's why we kind of grouped it together. So let's talk about it. So if we look at a 3-unit organization, 3 to 5 units, what are the key differences between that and, say, a 1 or a 2 unit enterprise?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest difference, and you touched on it already when you said it's you changing, it's the owner changing, it's moving from doing to directing. And I think it's pretty critical. I mean, this stage, if you're going to go from 3 to 5, this stage is absolutely critical in your organization's development for long-term viability. And the biggest changes, in my opinion, and maybe I'll say it this way. I had somebody tell me once years ago that, when you move to multi-unit management, you move from being a racehorse to becoming a horse trainer, right? Mm-hmm. So when you would have 1 or 2 locations, you can run 1 or 2 races. You can put in the hours. You can do the work. You can kind of fake it till you make it. But by the time you have 3, 4, 5 locations, you are not the horse. You're not the racehorse anymore. You are absolutely the trainer.
Well, let's put it this way. You, no matter how great of a racehorse you are not so great that you can run 4 races at the same time.
Nope, certainly not win them. That's for sure. That's what we're here to do, is to actually win the race, right? So I think again, so much needs to change at this level, and not change, but develop and become deep. I think that's the point of a lot of the pieces that I kind of noted down to talk about today.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, one of the things that I view when I'm looking at this is a lot of cases owners have stuff in their head, right? Oh, we do it this way. This is why we do it this way. We've made this change because I encountered a scenario 2 years ago, and that's why we changed and we do it this way. The problem is that most other people don't know all of that stuff. And so what you're trying to do is replicate yourself And they just have no idea what's going on because most of us don't have the stuff written down. Like if you right now and you were a 1 or 2 unit owner and I said, okay, I need someone to step in and do your job tomorrow, and all they have is the stuff that you've written down and the instructions that you have in place for that position, how do you think they're going to do? And most of us go, well, shit, we ain't got nothing written down, so they're going to be in for a hell of a time, right? Because we haven't really created the roles that we do. We just do it because we know and it's in our head. And I will tell you that stuff being in your head is not conducive to a long-term organization. And the reason, we've switched our verbiage here to talk about an organization or more of a corporate structure. And here's the reason why: is because you're not a small business anymore, right? 1 location, you're a small business. 2 locations, you're still kind of a small business, right? Now you are a larger business, and you need to think like a CEO and not the owner of it's. You're not like the rebel of a ragtag group of people that are, just trying to make it work. No, you are part of a structure now. And the reason I say that is because if you do not adapt to that, you will fold. It may not be tomorrow, but it will be eventually, because at some point you need to actually graduate and level your business skills up, because what you don't know can kill you. And I share this because, when I was the chair of the Chamber of Commerce here locally and on the board of directors, we always staggered people coming and going. And one of the reasons for that, we had like 2-year terms, 1-year terms, stuff like that. Reason we did that is so we retained what's called corporate knowledge. And when we did that, because we didn't want all of a sudden have everybody brand new and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. We wanted to make sure there were people there that still knew what was happening so they could pass it on and train people. And we wanted to make sure there was that collective sense of responsibility. And I'm thinking for most restaurants, especially me, when I went from 1 to 2, I was the only source of that knowledge. And I thought that made me really, really important, but it actually made me a liability when I get to that level, because what happens if I'm in a car wreck? My business goes under. Who bears the consequences of that? My family and all my employees and all my suppliers and everybody, right? All of a sudden, there's this big mess to untangle, and we need to shift our thinking around that. So that's kind of what I wanted to set the tone with today, is that we have to shift the way that we think about it. We have to shift the things we do, and it's all about the structure that comes along with it. So, all right, let's talk about this a little bit. So how should we be structuring this type of an organization?
So, I mean, the notes that I made, and in my experience, where I've seen the most success putting this kind of organization together is, it's depth. It's, when you said, you're no longer the leader of a ragtag team. It's like changing from a platoon leader to a general, right? So now we need lieutenants and sergeants. And what I mean by that is, as you start to expand, if your intention is to go beyond 3 to 5 to 8 to 12 to 20 to whatever it might be, this is where we start to define what that structure of accountability and management is going to look like. So at this stage, this is when, in my opinion, you should really be considering that next tier of executive leadership, where you're looking at regional operators, director of ops, director of culinary, whatever those roles are that fit your vision for the business. We need to create depth in accountability and structure. And again, for the longevity of the team, that's the play. So what do those roles look like? I mean, that's always a big question. What does a director of ops do? What does a regional operator do? That not only creating those roles or entertaining those roles, but absolutely clearly defining the responsibilities and expectations of those roles, who fits into them, how do we feed them the company culture, how do they breathe life into the company culture, and what are they doing every day to, forward the vision or to keep the trajectory of the business moving forward. They become that intermediary between the owner and, let's say, the management structure. They become the keepers of the brand. Hopefully that makes sense. That's one of the elements I'd be looking at.
And I think that what we have to define here too is that it also depends on the size of business. Now, I typically speak to my own experiences in more of a QSR environment. So again, when we looked at having, say, 3 locations, basically the change that I made was that with 2, I was still the owner and I had a manager each below me, right? So that was a shift that I made. Now, when I moved up to 3, instead of me being the regional manager of each of those people, I also had a regional manager. The reason why I did this, so let me play this out. So I was at the top, then I had a regional manager, and then the regional manager would oversee the 3 store managers, right? And the reason why I did that, it goes back to exactly what I said in the last podcast. You need an heir and a spare, right? Because it's not an if you will lose some of your management, it is when you will lose your management. So what you need is you need to have that regional manager there, and then you need to have managers below them that are ready to step into that role whenever it becomes vacant, because it will happen. And you will lose managers. And so below the managers, there needs to be assistant managers to be able to jump up and be able to take those management roles. Now, this is a really simplified version because obviously what Nathan's talking about is much different volume. So there you have your culinary directors, and there you might have your front of house manager, your kitchen manager, and your chef, and like there's different positions to be put in place there. But the concept is still the same. What you're trying to do is have some depth. Now, I am a big hockey fan. Unfortunately, my team is plagued with injuries at the moment as we're filming this, and so we have a lot of people coming up from our AHL affiliate. And but it's by that depth that we're able to still continue on and maintain our place in the standings. Where if we didn't have that depth, we would be cratering down to the bottom of the league, which, to be honest, is where we've been for the last 7 years. Not that I'm salty about that. So, basically,
could you imagine the ownership of the team having to play net, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, all of a sudden,
anybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, can you imagine the coach gets out there, straps on the pads? But that's the thing, right? But in our businesses, that's kind of what we do. Like we're like, well, I'll just get in there and do it. But what we're trying to do is preventing you from having to do that, because you as an owner are now worth far more with your time, because you need to be focused on growing the business and actually recruiting the right people into those leadership teams. You need to be focused on growing the leadership team and developing them more, focused on your profitability, on your marketing. That's where your focus needs to be. It is no longer on operations, and most of us start from being an operator. So that's like 95% of our focus. Well, guess what? Now that you're a regional manager owner, basically you have 3 locations, your operations is like 5 to 10% of your time. It's a total shift. And that's, I think, what gets most of us, because then we're like, well, shit, what do we do now? And we have to give away all of these responsibilities that we hold dear, because that's used to be how we felt successful, is by doing. And it's a big shift, and we have to come with a mental shift around it, because we're no longer successful by our ability to do. We are now measured by our success in getting others to do. That's the difference, right? Okay, so we've talked about how we need to shift that out. One of the biggest things is literally have everything written down. Here's a place to start for you. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, where do I start? Literally, just take a pen and paper, carry it with you. Every day, write down every single thing that you do every single day. And then take that list and go, okay, what could someone else do right now? Or what should someone else do? If you have a manager and right now you're doing your schedule for them, why? Is it that they're not trained? Well, train them. Right? Like it's that simple. We need to start with that. And then we build these job descriptions as we go, and we build these roles and responsibilities. Because at the end of the day, when you have 1 or 7, the responsibilities of the day-to-day don't change, but who does them, that's what changes. And then who holds them accountable and ensures that they get done, that's what changes, Mm-hmm. Hey, real quick, if you're a multi-unit restaurant owner or you're looking to become one, I've identified the 3 deadliest mistakes that are killing most restaurants right now. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid these exact mistakes. Just grab my free copy of the Multi-Unit Restaurant Playbook by going and clicking on the link in the description below. Inside, you'll discover my proven system for building a restaurant empire that runs on autopilot and the mistakes you must avoid if you want to stay profitable and scalable. So get the free playbook and transform your business today.
Yeah. Well said. And clearly defined. Once again, if you are in a spot where you're talking about creating a regional operator, well, what would they do? Absolutely, what would they do? If they're responsible for the managers, what does that mean? And you just simply work through it, like you said.
Well, let's give an example of that. So, like in a regional structure, what would a regional manager or operator do on a day-to-day basis? How would they allocate their time at, say, let's just use 3 locations for example here.
Sure. Okay, so how would it look? Let's say a regional operator has his 3 locations. So that regional operator has his responsibilities, and they might be to ensure food quality, execution, sales are meeting targets, profit is within target. But at the end of the day, where the rubber really meets the road is how are they doing it? What does their routine look like? So they are absolutely responsible for profit, first of all. So in examples or in structures that I've been a part of, the regional on, let's say Mondays, let's kind of build a bit of a weekly routine. So on Mondays, sure, as each store completes their inventory, finalizes their invoices, sends in the last of whatever accounting for payroll or whatever is required, though those managers at those locations are responsible for sending a report to the regional. And that's a structured report. It's there's an agenda to it. There's a layout for it. What is being reported? It comes to the regional. The regional aligns those or assesses those against company targets.
Let's stop here for a second. So, you know how we're talking about company targets and profit targets? If you're an owner and you don't know what those targets are, we should probably do that. Yeah. I'm just throwing it out there because most of us are going, let's do all these things and at the end of the year, see where we end up. But most of us don't even know what's possible or what our target should be. So if you don't have that, that is something that you need to have because your managers will never somehow get you more profit than you are aiming for, right? Mm-hmm. They will often get you less. So we need to set the targets and then work back how we are going to achieve that. So I just wanted to point that out because so many of us are like, well, what's your profit target? And they're like, I don't know, however much we make. I'm like, well, it's not a target. Like, we need to actually be more structured than that, So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to jump in.
No, it's a great point. And this brings me back to, so once again, I'm even just talking about, let's say, a Monday routine. That is designed, it's outlined, it's a responsibility. If you end up in a spot where you've got a regional who just kind of willy-nilly goes wherever, does whatever, you're not going to get the value out of that individual. We really want to define their routine. So I'll kind of keep going through a super high level, say, week as a regional, right? So Monday, every location, we're getting those reports. And here's the key element to this. The managers at those locations absolutely have to be in a position where they're trained, they're proficient, and they're focused on those targets in a way that they are pushing that information up, right? In my mind, a regional should never get on a call or have a conversation with a manager at a store level and say, hey, your sales are down %, and that manager be shocked by that number, right? They're the ones who are reporting. Now, the regional should know, don't get me wrong, but that information has to flow up so that the ownership is at that store level. The regional's job is to fundamentally refine and ensure that things stay where they should be, keeping the metrics, the strategies alive through coaching, through holding people accountable, through investigating and analyzing what strategies are happening at the store level. So that's why I say that if a regional ever has to tell a manager what their numbers are, you need to address that issue today. It can't work that way. They have to be the keepers of it. So let me kind of keep playing through it. So that's, more or less a Monday. In my organization, Tuesdays as a regional, and so Mondays also has its own other meetings and other things to look at without turning this into a 4-hour conversation of a regional routine. But Tuesday, the other kind of key element that a regional is responsible for is now, by Tuesday, we have profit reports, we have weekly, shored up, finalized accounting reports, and there's more rock solid numbers to look at, let's say. Mm-hmm. So Tuesdays, my regionals will get on a call with each manager and chef team. And again, this is a full service kind of layout. So there's a chef and a GM. They get on a call with those two and they run through the numbers: sales, labor, returns, discounts, marketing strategies, people, the whole shebang. And we just talk through it all. And again, there's a structure to it. It's not just show up and say, how was last week? It's Here's your structure for reporting, and we're going to talk through it. As a regional, I would have my own questions for that team, and it might run down some rabbit holes, but important ones. That turns into your Tuesday, and that's going to be across each location. And again, in my organization, now the regionals are also responsible for the development of the GMs and chefs. So now we've analyzed profit, we've analyzed some strategies, we have some idea of what's going on with the people. And when I say people, I mean development of high-level potentials. I should probably say that as well. We're not necessarily talking about the new apps, we're talking about how are your assistants being developed, what's next, kind of focused on that mid-level.
For sure.
Come Wednesday, my regionals will be in each of the stores. So maybe Wednesday they might be at store 1 for lunch. So they'll show up, they'll watch the service, they might ask some new employees that have gone through training, they might double check some training points, and then they're going to do a one-on-one with the GM. So no chef, just a sit-down conversation. What are you working on? What are you focused on? Where are you differentiated in my whole grid of GMs? And why are you there? How do we move you to the next level? What's next for your development? Here's what I want you to focus on. Give me feedback. I want to hear from you. Then same thing happens with the chef. There might be a small environment audit because we are then responsible to make sure that the store looks good and execution is happening the way it should, so on and so forth. Yep. Then off to store 2. Store 2, we replicate that process. Then the next day might be store 3 and 4. Now, these things change all the time, but I'm just trying to, again, outline what that responsibility looks like. Because now, anything that happens at any store, if sales are down, is it traced back to the GM and chef team, let's say? Sure. Do they have strategies in place? Yes. What are they doing? They're doing X, Y, and Z. This is their commitment to that. This is when they're doing those things. But how do we know that that's happening? That's the regional's responsibility. The regional is responsible for ensuring that the GMs and chefs are doing what they've committed to or the plans that have been built together, whatever it might be. That's how they're checking, trust but verified. This is the verification process. And then that kind of plays out throughout the week. And of course, there are different elements that might play out, different store visits or individual processes, training rollouts that might be happening. Regionals are responsible for ensuring any new policies, procedures are rolled out. And then once again, inspecting those, trusting but verifying that those systems are not only just being followed at a high level, checking a box, but that culture is deep in each location. That execution is deep in each location. And they do that through, again, being a horse trainer and making sure that the GM, the chef, or the management team, they're running up the sand dunes and strengthening their legs so that they can actually win this horse race. I don't know. Does that kind of make sense?
No, it totally does. And I'm just putting myself in the place of our listeners right now and them saying, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And I probably don't do much or any of that. And so I would probably say that that's why most restaurants in their operations are quite volatile, is because they don't necessarily have these structures in place. They're not necessarily asking, okay, so right now, once our GM leaves, which we hope doesn't happen, but if and when that does, who replaces them, right? And how are we upskilling that person? And who are we getting in place, to be the next regional? How are we upskilling that person? And what kind of marketing plans do we have in place in advance, and what are our profit targets? And so like all of these things, like right now, they probably live in the head of most owners. And so talking through all of this stuff, it seems like a lot, but hey, this is what normal looks like for a multi-unit organization. And I want to clarify that because most of us, we get there and then we're trying to figure this all out on our own, and we are so busy reacting to what's happening in our businesses. Oh, someone quits, so then the owner has to go and manage a store all of a sudden. Well, then who's going to ensure that all the other locations are up to par? Who's going to ensure that they are meeting their profit targets if all of a sudden all of your focus is now just at one location? And so most of us don't put people in place because either we don't have the right people in place, like to be able to promote someone, so that's fair, but you probably also, as an owner, don't know how to train them. And so you don't even know what's expected, and so therefore it becomes really hard to actually get someone to train them, and you also don't want to spend the money. But I will say that by saving that money, you are actually shortchanging yourself on the growth of your organization, right? And because, you might save a salary here, but you're going to pay for it over the long term. And so it really depends on where you want to go as an organization and which risk you're okay with. And are you okay with staying in the same place for the next few years? Or are you okay with paying for that development to move yourself forward? So those are kind of the choices we have to make as owners. I just remember for me, having a regional was tough because all of a sudden then it wasn't, what did I do with my time? Is kind of what I had to figure out, because now, what do I do? But there's always stuff to do. There's always things to do. And you have to then change what you do to higher level stuff. So literally just working, like most of my job was working on marketing, and it was working on the finance side of it, and just making sure that we were getting where we needed to go and driving the organization forward. And if I was stuck in a location because we lost a manager, well, none of that happened. And so we basically our organization, instead of marching forward, we just halted for 6 months. It just stayed there until we then, were able to get it going again. So it's just such a trap when you end up doing it that way. Another thing that we used to do, though, from a regional manager perspective, is we also used to do an audit every month as well. And so this is something, it was just so simple. It was like, is the front of the store clean when you're walking in? Is everything up to par? Yes or no? And you're going through every section, whether it be uniforms, whether it be service, whether it be product, like everything. And we would basically go through, and then we would get a rating. And we did this so that we could have all the locations on the same rating scale. And so then every month we would take that rating and we would look at the areas where they lost the most points. And then we would work through a plan for that month to bring it up to par. And so we were always measuring ourselves and keeping us all accountable on what needed to happen. So that was just one thing that we instituted. It's also because I wanted to see how each of those individual locations were performing on a uniform scale, because I didn't want to just say like, oh, this person says things are great, but are they really great? I wanted to know what that looks like. So I wanted to verify. So I had the regional management and the management put that in place. So those are a few things that we did. But let's talk a little bit more about like, what does comp look like for regional managers and management at this point. And I mean, most owners, first thing they do is say, well, it's a lot of money. And sure, it is. But why should we pay that? What's the benefit of that? And what are we really trying to structure when we're talking about comp for higher level employees?
Yeah, I mean, in my head and in the strategies that I've built when it comes to compensation structures, and there's a lot of different avenues you can play in this space. But to me, the biggest element here is that if we want to attract top talent and retain top talent, we have to give them an opportunity to carve out for themselves or achieve for themselves the opportunities that they are passionate about in their lives. So it's kind of as simple as, can they make enough money and create enough opportunity for themselves to be in this position for the next 15 to 20 years? Right? We don't want to hire a regional that's going to turn over every, year or even 2 years or 3 years. A regional turning over at 3 years is a travesty. It is a nightmare. You don't want that to happen. But how do we, regardless of whether you're quick serve, full serve, fine dining, how do we keep that talent engaged in the business? So, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of compensations that I've seen and played with, from, performance bonus pieces. So if they reach certain targets, there is a certain amount of money that they can achieve for their own income. So if you maintain food cost under 0.5% of theoretical costs, let's say, if you can maintain that, there's going to be a monthly or quarterly or even yearly, I don't love yearly, but anyway, bonus that is going to be this amount, right? Or this percentage of, say, profit. There's different ways to structure that, but if it's performance based, it's up to them to give themselves a raise. You want to make more money, lock in the food cost. If you want to make more money, keep your labor on track. If you want to make more money, make sure that we have the next tier of leadership being developed and ratified, and you'll make more money. It's kind of as simple as that. Now there are other structures, so profit share. Right? Those are generally not tied directly to performance. They're usually tied to things like tenure or position. profit shares is tricky, but it's like having shares in a company without paying for shares in a company, I guess is how I think about it. It's almost like a dividend payout. But then there's other things to consider. As you start to grow and as you have more locations, maybe your team gets bigger. What do we look at for investment opportunities? Can they buy in? Can they do sweat equity, for ownership or shareholding or share acquisition within the organization? I've seen and helped build out structures that are investment trusts as well, where you can put money into the performance of the company, like buying, mutual funds or whatever, and it's going to pay out predictably, hopefully, over a period of time. You can draw your money out and then reinvest it. That really, those kinds of structures do help raise capital for growth in an organization as well. So you can give opportunity to your executive team while also bringing in cash flow and investment capital for the growth. So it's kind of a double whammy, but it's a tricky one. They're all kind of tricky, and they require an awful lot of work and agreement and measure, and it's an investment, but it's an investment that you're making into, the long-term viability of your people structure, which is at the end of the day, that's the structure of the business.
Yeah, no, I love that part too. So kind of what I did, my management, I basically made sure their bonuses were tied to the things that they had direct control over. So their food and their labor costs was one. They had to keep those within a target. My regional manager, on the other hand, we did a percentage of profit, because then I didn't want her to be tied directly to the performance of the managers below her, which is how it was originally. I wanted her to think more globally around, okay, like, say I'll give you an example. Like, is it more advantageous to do quarterly maintenance and to bring people in to do quarterly maintenance on your equipment versus paying for those large repair bills if you don't, right? Which of those is actually best for the business? Because it's also easy for employees to say, oh, we should buy this piece of equipment and that piece of equipment and this. And so then all of a sudden the regional, to make those types of decisions, had to go, okay, is it actually going to be in the best interest of the business? Not like, is this a nice to have, or is it actually going to make us more money in the long run? And so every decision had to be filtered through the same lens that I would filter it as. And so that's why I did that in my business. Now, granted, it was like a 10% profit share, but so it wasn't like exorbitant, but it put us all on the same side. And that's kind of the way I want everyone to look at it. I want people to be on the same side as the ownership, right? Is when we're doing these bonuses.
In the game, right? If you can't expect them to be passionate and committed just out of good faith and goodwill, right? Their performance needs to be rewarded. And if they see it as an investment of work, sweat, or time, so long as they are, being paid appropriately for the work and the results that they're producing, then I think that's the play in my experience.
Absolutely. So the things that we've covered today, we could probably, the depth to which we could go on this is obviously huge, but to keep it in bite-sized chunks for everybody listening, the main things when you shift from, say, 1 to 2 locations to 3 to 5 is how well defined all of the roles are, to actually have people in all of those positions, to free the owner up to be in a place where you can actually be the CEO, and that there's levels below you to prevent you from having to go and actually run an individual location and getting stuck in doing someone else's position. And those should all be defined. The system should be defined so that if one person was to leave tomorrow, not only would there be someone in line to replace them, but also it should be so clearly defined that they can look at all the documentation and the training around it and basically be able to onboard and train themselves on how to do the role. That's how clearly defined we want it to be, because I have lived it where every time we lost a manager, we then had to train a manager from scratch, which took us 6 months. And so every time we had to do that, we took a step back by 6 months, and it paused our ability to focus on growth because we had to get our feet set under us again. And with 4 locations, this does happen pretty consistently, right? It's just, it's a thing that happens. And the more locations you have, the more frequently it will happen. Not because you're doing anything wrong. You just got more things on the go, and it will just happen just by the nature of the numbers. So you want to be prepared for that. And so we need to make sure that happens. You want to set up your management team with a structure that actually rewards them for performance and puts them on the same side as you. And we basically just need to shift from thinking about being a doer into more of a trainer and leader. So again, Nathan's example of the racehorse versus a horse trainer, right? That's kind of the difference we need to shift into. And so I think those are probably the main things that we have to understand. And if you do not do the things that we have outlined, I've seen way too many businesses still try and function at 3 or 4 locations like they were with 1 or 2, and they end up getting so overwhelmed. The owner doesn't have any time to focus on the ownership aspects, and so the business just rots from the inside because they're trying to do too much. They can't do it all because they don't have the right people and the right systems in place. And then all of a sudden your sales start going down, your profits start going down, and then when you don't have any profits, you can't pay your bills and you end up going under. And so that's the biggest thing. We have to have our eye on the prize, and the only way to do that is to make sure we have eyes available that are not looking elsewhere, right?
Yeah. The tagline I always have when I think about, the sustainability or the growth of an organization is every system. And when I say system, I mean training, SOPs, cost management tools, routines, all of it. Is it, or are they absolutely strategic, intentional, and replicatable? Because if they're not those 3 things, then they're not sustainable. And you'll continue to find yourself having to reinvent the wheel. Like you said, a manager leaves and now 6 months of training and we've just been held back. Well, I tell you that I've been in that position, 100 times probably. And I got to a point where I knew my people grid, for example, where if a manager left, I already knew before they left who the next person was for that role, and they'd already been groomed for it. Now, were they 100% ready? No, but they might be 60% ready, and 60% is way better than 0%, because there were expectations, processes, training, development, and time committed to building those things. So again, if it's not strategic, intentional, and replicatable, then I'm here to tell you it's not sustainable.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope this was valuable for you. And I would love if you could just take a second, leave us a comment, leave us a 5-star review, or if you think this could help someone else, another restaurant owner, please share it with them, and we will give you all the love in the world. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Good luck out there.
This episode is brought to you by Ownership Training, where we help restaurant owners increase their profits while spending more time with their family. And if you want to know exactly what it would take to grow your profit margin to 15% and beyond while spending more time with your family, my team has a few spots open this week for a free 15-minute restaurant assessment call. Just click the book a call link in the description, and we'll show you the exact frameworks we're using to help our clients do this in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.